Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Thursday, July 1st, brand new month, and we are 50% done with the year of 2021. And we're breaking down the 7-game main slate that we have over on DraftKings today. There is a 5-game early slate today, starting at around 1 p.m. Eastern. And just some quick hitters on that if you are playing it by chance and you're watching this before 1 o'clock. I think Sean Manaea, Ryu, Dane Dunning are probably your best pitching options there. Yes, Carlos Rodon, Jose Barrios, if you have the money for them, are always going to be viable because there's some pretty darn good pitchers. When you factor in the matchups and the price tags, I think those guys do stand out pretty well. And that KC-Boston game looks like it's going to be probably the best one for offense, close to an 11 over-under for that game. I think the Yankees bats look pretty good versus Canning, and there's a couple of other decent spots, and obviously you can always play Rodon and Barrios if you had the money for them, but just kind of some quick hitters there for the other slate if you are happening to play that slate. But I want to focus on the main slate tonight in this video. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to follow me over on social media, you can do so using the handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon and get access to extra content, now is literally the best time to do so, considering it is the first of the month. You get your best bang for your buck there, but you get projections, the entire data sheet, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link is down below. And I do cover other sports, including NASCAR, and then football once that time comes, and NBA, but since it's just showdown slates, I don't do anything for that as of right now. So if you want to check it out, link is down below in the description. And I think that's it for the plug, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. As per usual, we'll start with the pitchers, then move on to the bats. And the pitching yesterday was pretty gross for the most part. Aaron Nola ended up having 11 strikeouts, but then he ended up giving up 7 runs at the very end. Like, he was cruising. Like, he was absolutely killing it. You needed Aaron Nola to cash for a while last night. And then last time I looked, he ended up giving up 7 runs. I was like, what the heck happened to Aaron Nola? At least he had the strikeouts to back it up. But kind of a weird pitching slate. Ohtani got smashed. Luis Garcia struggled at the beginning. Bailey Ober was pretty chalky. Then the White Sox ended up scoring like 2 touchdowns in that game. So really weird pitching slate. Musgrove kind of got beat up early on too. So hopefully we don't have a repeat of that today, but I'm going to have a hard time seeing that happen to guys like Jacob deGrom and Corbin Burns, and then I love that price tag of Ian Anderson. But anyway, we'll start up top with Jacob deGrom, $11,500. He is the best pitcher in baseball, and to be honest, he looks like the best pitcher of all time at points. I mean, if he keeps pitching like this, I mean, he could definitely go down in history as that. I mean, he is just absolutely way too good. Now, his last start, I believe it was versus the Phillies. It wasn't exactly the greatest thing in the world, but I'm willing to give him a pass there just because of exactly how great he's been this season. Yes, the matchup versus Atlanta, there's some tough outs there around Acuna, Freddie Freeman, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley's not half bad, and there's some other good bats there as well. It's Jacob deGrom. I don't really care what the matchup is. If you got the money for him, you can always play him, and you're probably going to want to try to find a way to do that. Now, I'm not going to say he's an absolute must-play because Corbin Burns is, what, $2,300 cheaper, and then you could always use Ian Anderson, plus we have Coors Field, so there's some expensive bats we can fit in. So if you can't fit deGrom in now in cash games, I'm probably going to try to find a way to do that. I realize he's not pitching like 100 pitches per game these days, but he was up to 88 last game. He has had some injuries here and there, which kind of has altered his pitch count a little bit, but I mean, we should get around 90 something. I mean, if all goes well, but I mean, looking at his numbers this season, it's kind of like a video game. He's at a 44.5% K rate, which is actually down 2% from the last time I believe he pitched, but obviously still fantastic. 0.69 ERA, 1.79 xFIP, 1.79 Sierra. Doesn't really walk many guys, over 14 Ks per 9, less than 100 ISO given up, 30% hard contact rate, less than half a homer per 9. I mean, love Jacob deGrom here. Again, matchup versus Atlanta isn't exactly great, but they will strike out a little bit. Versus Reddy's a 25% K rate. Obviously got some power. They walk quite a bit and a decent WRC plus, but it's Jacob deGrom we're talking about, and they have a team total less than 3 here, 8.5 K prop, and a pretty heavy favorite. So if you got the money for him, please find a way to play Jacob deGrom. Then if you need to save some money, obviously you could play both together, although you're kind of breaking the bank a little bit. But like I said a few videos ago, it's been pretty easy to double spend it for a pitcher this year, like way easier than it has been in the past. So if you want to play both, I have no issue with that. But Corbin Burns here, $9,200. He's definitely fallen off from grace a little bit. I mean, his numbers at the beginning of the season were amazing. He had 0 walks. I mean, he's still been good. It's just he hasn't been that top level kind of player that he was earlier in the year. Might be due to sticky stuff, but either way, he's still fine. I mean, it's a matchup versus Pittsburgh. I know they don't strike out too much, but Corbin Burns has around a 40% K rate, similar walk rate to Jacob deGrom, 2.01 xFIP, 2.25 Sierra. His numbers aren't too far off of Jacob deGrom. Obviously not quite his level, but they're not too far off. Actually giving up less power at 0.77, 50% ground ball rate, only a 24% hard contact rate, and only 0.2 homers per 9. I think I'd be very shocked if we get a homer from Pittsburgh today when Corbin Burns on the mound, like only 0.2 homers per 9 given up. And then if you're looking at their splits versus righties this season, they have a 123 team ISO. Again, they're not striking out a ton, but when a guy with a 40% K rate nearly goes on the mound, I think the strikeouts should be there for him. And $9,200, I think he's a fair price point. Pitcher-friendly park in Pittsburgh, pretty heavy favorite here, and only a 3.1 implied team total gets him. Those are definitely the two best pitching options on the slate today. And if you need to save some money at pitcher, or if you don't want to double spend up and you want to go one of either DeGrom and Burns, plus a cheaper pitcher, Ian Anderson makes a ton of sense here. $7,100, same game as DeGrom, just obviously on the opposite side, but only a 3.5 total against him. Obviously, he's going to be an underdog here going up against DeGrom. I mean, no one's ever going to be a favorite going up against Jacob DeGrom at pitcher, just because the opposing offense is probably not going to score any runs. If they do, maybe just a couple, but either way, I mean, no surprise that he's an underdog here. But his numbers have been fine this season, and I think he should definitely be more expensive than $7,100, and he has had success versus the Mets earlier this season. 26% K rate. Can walk some guys, which is a little bit of an issue, but over a 50% ground ball rate, only a 118 ISO given up. And these numbers are going to show up bright red. But again, we're getting compared to DeGrom and Corbin Burns here. Like, obviously, they're going to look worse than those two guys. But if you had a bigger sample size here, like if you look at the actual pitcher sheet instead of the one I put together for YouTube, I mean, these numbers are, shaded close to green here. So no concerns there. And looking at the splits for the Mets this season, 24% K rate, 138 team ISO, 299 WOBA, 94 WRC plus. Nothing to really be too concerned about. So I think Ian Anderson at that price point definitely looks really good point per dollar wise. And if you had to spend down for pitcher today, I definitely think he's the best option to do so. But only 3 guys here today. I think it's kind of pretty cut and dry for the most part who you play at pitcher. I'd have a hard time in cash games playing anybody outside of these 3 pitchers. Yes, there's other viable guys you could go for in tournaments to try to find some leverage, but I see no reason not to play like 2 of these 3 guys today if you're playing one lineup. So I'd rather get different with my bats other than these pitchers, as they stand out way above the rest, in my opinion. So with that being said, we can move over to the bats, and as always, we'll start with the catcher position. And we have a Coors Field game here. The Cardinals are in town, and that means they're going to definitely be spread throughout the sheet because they're going up against Antonio Sensatella, not a very good pitcher. They have a team total close to 6 here, so you're going to see a lot of Cardinals here, but they definitely make some sense here. So we'll start with Yadier Molina. $4,200, should be hitting right in the middle of the order. Obviously not the best hitting catcher out there, but for a catcher, his numbers aren't too bad. 170 ISO, 255 batting average, and Sensatella is just not a very good pitcher, so yeah, you can sign me up for all the Cardinals. Plus the bullpen for the Rockies, so they can get Sensatella out early on. Obviously not that great, and same goes for the Cardinals. Their bullpen's not very good, so this could be a very, very high-scoring game. And then dropping out Will Smith here, $4,000. So if you notice that it said he was facing Jacob DeGrom, it was pulling up the other Will Smith for the Atlanta relief pitcher, so I had to change that. But now he's going up against Patrick Corbin, which is the correct pitcher that he's facing today, and it's definitely a much softer matchup versus Corbin than it would be Jacob DeGrom. Corbin's a bit of like a hit-or-miss pitcher. Sometimes he's on and he looks pretty good, but when he's off, he is off, and he looks like he's throwing batting practice out there, so we'll see what kind of Patrick Corbin we get today. He's been decent recently, but I have some PTSD from some of the starts where I rostered him earlier this season where he just got absolutely shellacked, so might just be tainting my memory a little bit. But I still think the Los Angeles Dodgers look pretty good here versus Corbin, especially the righties. Team total close to 5 here. They're on the road, so you get those guaranteed nothing at bats. And the Washington bullpen isn't exactly the greatest thing out there if they do get to Corbin early on. So Will Smith, pretty good hitting catcher, over 200 ISO this season with a batting average close to 260. So I think Will Smith's fine in all formats. Then if you want to go super cheap, we have Jason Castro, $2,200. Thought the Astros team total would be a little bit higher here versus the righty, but I mean, still 4.77 is not too bad. And if you want to target the cheaper options, I don't think this is a good day to kind of get the expensive guys like Yuli Gurriel, Correa, Jose Altuve, and Jordan Alvarez. Just think there's better spots to spend up today, but obviously I have no issues with some of the cheaper guys, which I do have listed here. But Jason Castro's got some decent pop, not a big batting average guy, but for his price tag as a catcher, he's got some decent numbers for some upside at $2,200. Dropping down to first base, we have a couple of Coors Field guys here in CJ Cron and Paul Goldschmidt. Liking the Rockies quite a bit, liking the Cardinals, don't think you can go wrong with either. Although the Cardinals look a little bit better here versus Sensatella, a much softer pitcher than Adam Wainwright. But if they can get to Adam Wainwright early on, the Cardinals bullpen is one of the worst in the league xFIP-wise. Like looking at their overall numbers, team xFIP for their bullpens at 4.9, Rockies are at 4.76, and those are some of the worst in the entire league. I know the Cardinals are way up there, so if they can get this Adam Wainwright early on, he's a good pitcher. Like I have nothing against Adam Wainwright. It's just Coors Field's going to kind of nullify a lot of your numbers. So if they get the winner early on, it's definitely going to be good for the Rockies here. And team total 5.65. CJ Cron, not a huge batting average guy, batting 260 this season, but over a 360 WOBA and over a 200 ISO. So I do like the power upside here. Paul Goldschmidt, 4,500 bucks. He'll probably end up being pretty chalky, not overly expensive. Should probably be above 5K in Coors Field. The fact that he's not, I feel like you're getting a decent price tag for him. And Santella just average pitcher at best is what I would say. And his numbers are not that great this season. Cedar Cone actually has better numbers, but it's still Paul Goldschmidt in Coors Field and a team total of nearly 6 today. And Albert Pujols, 3,100 bucks. Since there's a lefty on the mound, he should be in the lineup batting around cleanup. And if that's the case, he's got over a 200 ISO this season. Like, he has been pretty bad this year, but the one thing he has done well is hit lefties this season. Like, he's actually batting 324 versus lefties, 441 WOBA, 366 ISO, 186 WRC plus, and a 690 slugging. So, I mean, if he's in the lineup, assuming he is, which he should be, and betting cleanup, I mean, 3,100 bucks, not a bad price point for him because he has been absolutely crushing left-handed pitching this season. And as crazy as that sounds, old man Pujols, but seems like he's turning the clock back a little bit versus lefties. And then dropping down to second base, we have Colton Wong, 5,100 bucks. I believe he's the only Milwaukee Brewer I'm going to talk about, but I think they make for a decent stack here versus Will Crowe. He's just not a good pitcher. Obviously, I don't like going to Pittsburgh. If this was Milwaukee, the team total is probably going to be above 5 here. But Colton Wong's been decent this season. Close to a 200 ISO, batting around 300. I don't even want to say decent. He's actually been just good this year. I just don't love paying over $5,000 for him, plus I'm not in love with the Brewers, but I do think they make for a decent stack tonight, and I imagine they're going to have some pretty low ownership, so if you're looking for leverage, I don't hate going to the Brewers there. Tommy Edman, 4,700 bucks. Prefer him versus lefties. I imagine he's going to be hitting a little bit lower in the order, but he's still fine here. I mean, his numbers aren't great. Doesn't have a ton of power, but we're in Coors Field and it's Sensatella. Chris Taylor, 4,200 bucks. You could also play him in the outfield, but just a righty on the Dodgers here versus Patrick Corbin. 190 ISO this season. Pretty high WOBA, pretty high WRC plus, 31 OBP. I think he makes for a decent play at that price point. Dropping at third base, we have Nolan Arenado, 5,500 bucks. I prefer him versus left-handed pitching, but again, you can use all the Cardinals here versus Antonio Sensatella with a big price point. But if you're using a guy like Ian Anderson and Corbin Burns and you're not playing Jacob deGrom, you can probably do whatever you want with your bats tonight as long as you throw a couple value guys in, which we have listed here, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Justin Turner, righty on lefty power here versus Patrick Corbin. As Dribble Cabrera, I'm going to try to spend up for third base today because I don't like any of the cheap third base options. Because I feel like I could just go Paul DeYoung at shortstop, save some money there. So maybe at third base I do spend up a little bit because I don't really want to play as Dribble Cabrera versus Johnny Cueto. Cabrera's numbers this season have not been impressive whatsoever. It's just he's cheap and he's capable of getting on base on a run, which is fine. I just hate rostering Diamondbacks. For the most part, they're starting a really, really good spot. And I wouldn't say this is a very good spot versus Johnny Cueto. But if you need the price savings, as Dribble Cabrera is there, you could also look at Abraham Toro, assuming he's in the lineup. Going to shortstop, we have Trevor Story, the Coors Field guy, 5,900 bucks. Like, I would just rather play Paul DeYoung. Like, I like the power upside. Still is not very good. Adam Wainwright's a fine pitcher. Like, I don't really want to pick on Adam Wainwright too much. That's why I'm preferring the Cardinals here. But if they can get him out of the game early on, I mean, it should be fine for the Rockies. It's just, these guys are pretty expensive, and they have a lower team total than the Cardinals, and I'd just rather play Paul DeYoung for over $2,000 cheaper. Brandon Crawford, 4,600 bucks versus Merrill Kelly. Merrill Kelly's not the worst pitcher out there, but he will give some power and hard contact. And Brandon Crawford has been good this year, especially in the power department. 271 ISO this season, 135 WRC plus, and a 525 slugging. Do like the home run upside here for Brandon Crawford. I think the Giants make for a decent contrarian stack tonight. You can play Mike Yas, Buster Posey, Brandon Crawford. I think all these guys are viable in tournaments. And Paul DeYoung, 3,400 bucks. He's probably going to be your cash game shortstop tonight. I mean, cheap on a high team total on the road. Has a 176 ISO this season. That's the only thing he does well is hit for a little bit of power. Even though that's nothing crazy, but 165 batting average. So don't expect really a bunch of singles here. Just try to hope for that home run. And 3,400 bucks, you'd be happy with that. Going down to outfield, we have Mookie Betts, 5,600 bucks. If you're stacking the Dodgers, he's obviously kind of an integral part of that offense, so you have to roster him. Charlie Blackmon, if you're stacking the Rockies, 5,400 bucks. Not having the greatest of years, but he did have a good game. The Pittsburgh Pirates, I want to say he had a triple, or either he had a triple or a home run. I don't remember, but I mean, if you're stacking the Rockies, he's fine as a lefty versus Adam Wainwright. Raimel Tapia, same thing. He's just $1,100 cheaper, so I'd much rather get to him in cash games over Charlie Blackmon. Tyler O'Neill, $4,000. He's probably your top play in the entire slate. Tons of power. Batting average around 270 this season, 373 WOBA. Near a 300 ISO, 141 WRC plus, and over a 560 slugging. If you were going to roster one guy tonight, I think Tyler O'Neill is probably the guy you should be rostering. He's in Coors Field, should be betting cleanup. I'd prefer if it was a lefty, sure, but he still has tons of power, and I love Tyler O'Neill tonight. He's fairly priced, and he is going to probably be the highest owned bet on the slate, especially in cash games. Michael Brantley, 3,900 bucks. He's cheap once again. He gets a decent matchup here versus Mejia, the righty, and high batting average this season, not a ton of power, but he's just a pure good hitter. Doesn't strike out, puts the ball in play, and that's all you can really ask for in cash games. So below $4,000, think Michael Brantley is definitely in play. Plus, he's going back to his old stadium, facing his old team, so maybe there's a little bit of extra juice there. Not that I think he has vengeance or anything, but I mean, still, it's a familiar park for him, so he definitely knows his way around that stadium. Dylan Carlson should be leading off for the Cardinals, switch hitter there, so lefty here versus Antonio Santella. I mean, you should probably be playing Dylan Carlson and Tyler O'Neill in cash games today, and then you can throw Michael Brantley in there, and it's nothing overly expensive, but Carlson and O'Neill, if you're playing cash games today, as long as they're hitting where they're projected to, I don't see why you wouldn't play them. Now, Kyle Tucker, $3,700, just kind of a cheaper version of Michael Brantley, just with more power and less contact, but like the home run upside here for Kyle Tucker, and he is pretty darn cheap at $3,700. Jonathan Daza, $3,200. If you just want cheap course field exposure, team total about 5.5 here, he's fine. He's just not the most exciting roster out there. Then AJ Pollock, $3,000, won't be hitting super high in the order or anything, but just cheap ready power versus Patrick Corbin. With that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me over on social media if you want to do so. And if you want to help support the channel, over on Patreon is the best time to do so, considering it's the first of the month. And I do cover other sports as well, including NASCAR. I'm very proud of my NASCAR content, so if you've never played it before, you want to try it out, I think it'll be very helpful for you guys. We have multiple people take down tournaments this season, and obviously all the baseball stuff as well. And you can figure out all the stuff that is included there, just hitting the link down in the description. But with that being said, guys, I will stop rambling. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And with that being said, I will be out of here, so I'll see you guys in the next one.